After learning a little bit about Michael Hainey, I've decided he must never sleep. He's a deputy editor of GQ, a published poet, a painter, a journalist well known for his interviewing skills of uber celebrities like Keith Richards, and now a New York Times best-selling author. After visiting friends is the story of a son who goes in search of the truth surrounding his father's death in his own identity in relation to his father. In this search, he makes the reader look within his or her own life. It's a memoir focusing on the impact of losing a parent at a young age and the power our parents have over us. The relationships he details, especially those with his mother and grandmother, are a beautiful tribute to the influence of the mother on a son, perfect for Mother's Day. These themes certainly make Michael's story an excellent book group choice. I'm delighted to introduce Michael Hainey.
Yeah. Okay. Can everyone hear me? I can move that in. So thank you for having me. You can all hear me? I tend to mumble, so if you can't hear me. I'm happy to be here. I was telling them out in the hallway that when I moved to the East Coast, to New York, almost 25 years ago, I spent a year with my uncle in Ridgefield, just up the road, so I always consider this my sort of, Connecticut gave me my start on the East Coast, so I'm always very appreciative of that. The book, how many of you have read it? It's okay. So then I'll give a quick description of it that adds to that. It's set in the Chicago newspaper world of the 1950s and 60s, where my parents met. It's sort of a love story. They met at the Chicago Tribune, where my mother started working when she was 15. My father grew up in a small town in Nebraska, and he always wanted to be a newspaper man. So they met there. My mother married, had my brother and me, and my father continued to working, and he sort of, in some ways, was this Don Draperish figure, as I learned. But it's a very personal story. It's a family story, which is about family secrets. We all have family, and every family has these mysteries inside it. Mine was that I realized the story we had been told about the circumstances around my father's death never really added up to me, and so I spent a good 30 years in fear of going in search of this truth, and then I sort of went in search of it, and it took me 10 years to write this book. But the result, I think, is something that's pretty powerful. So with that said, we wanted to read just two very brief passages for you. The first opens with my grandmother, and it's the first page. It's a scene that I'm very fond of because up until the point I wrote it, I wasn't sure how to begin this book and how to structure it. And my grandmother was an old Polish woman in Chicago, and after my father died, she really sort of raised me. I'll preface all of by saying I've yet to get through a reading without crying, so if I tear up, you have to forgive me. She died while I was writing the book. This first page really gives a lot of the themes of the book, which are stories inside of stories and memories, and how our own identities are so bound up in the stories of our parents and our grandparents. So I'll start with that. What you are. I was home from school visiting my grandmother in Chicago when she told me this story, a story that involved an old Polish custom. When a boy has his first birthday, his family sits him in his high chair, and on the tray before him, they place three objects: coin, shot glass, crucifix. Whatever the boy chooses, my grandmother says to me, that will be his life. And I said, what did I choose? You, she says, you slammed your fist on the tray, sent everything scattering to the ground. There was your mother on her knees, searching, cursing you and all the pieces she couldn't find. I never heard that story. There's lots of stories you haven't heard. And then I'll jump briefly to a second part of the book, and this, just to set it up, it involves, if you've never been to Chicago, this scene takes place, it begins in Grant Park, which is sort of the Chicago equivalent of Central Park, and then it proceeds up Michigan Avenue, which is sort of like Fifth Avenue. We end up in front of the Chicago Tribune building, and there's a brief moment before that where I have a flashback of a memory involving going down with my brother and my father to the Sun-Times newsroom and getting his paycheck one day. I think that should explain most of it, the context for you. June, my mother's birthday. I go to Chicago. I tell her, name what you want to do. The day is on me. Would you take me downtown, she says. We never get to do that together. You know, it's a nice day. We could see the park and have some lunch. We start in Millennium Park. Grant Park, the name it used to carry. That was before Mayor Daley had enough of the past and decided to remake it. Mayor Daley, son of the Mayor Daley I grew up with, the one we called the mayor, the one who died in his doctor's office, Christmas of '76. Then his son follows him into the job. Sons following fathers, that's the Chicago way. I would have been 4, maybe 5. My brother and I are with our father, walking through the newsroom. It is my father's day off. We are here to get his paycheck. The newsroom is bright and big and wide, the largest room I have ever seen. White lights hang overhead, windows rim the room, and everywhere desks and paper and men. Men in white shirts and black ties sit at battered desks. Some have typewriters, some do not. Some read pieces of paper, others type on pieces of paper. Men walk through the room carrying pieces of paper or in search of pieces of paper. Telephones ring, men yell across the room, and clouds of cigarette smoke hang over the room like storm clouds in miniature. Some of the men are older than my father. They have hard guts and greased back hair. When my father walks with us through the newsroom, his hands on our small shoulders, guiding us through the labyrinth of desks, men stop us. Your boys, Bob? A cigarette jangles from a man's lip, and he slides a red pencil behind his hair-pocked ear. Put her there, son. A big hand reaches toward my head. My father tells me, shake the man's hand. I do. The man says, think you'll be a newspaper man, like your pop? I nod. That's good, he says. Remember, the only good man is a newspaper man. The man laughs and huffs puffs of cigarette smoke down toward me. Through it, I can see his face, veiny and rough as a cantaloupe rind. He's a good kid, Bob. He'll make a good reporter. He ain't got no fear, just like you. It's a world of men, of stories, of knowledge. This is my father's world, and I want to be a part of it. I want to be a man who knows the facts, a man who changes of the city, wrong and right, who's up, who's down. Yes, I think I want to belong to this. We're silent now as we walk, my mother and I. Always the silence. Me still feeling like I'm 9, 10, 11 years old, afraid to speak. We walk amid all the millennium has become. The new gardens and sculptures, like the bean, an enormous corpuscle-shaped silver orb that reflects and distorts the identity of whoever stands before it. Or the fountain, where the faces of Chicagoans appear and disappear on a giant electronic mirror of glass cubes. Every so often, a plume of water spurts from someone's mouth, and down below, children seeking relief from the sun splash in the shower, sliding and slipping along the slick stone. Some come with bathing suits, prepared for the deluge. Others in street clothes, dragged in just the same. I decide to push beyond my 9-year-old fears. It occurs to me this park is a door into my mother's past. This is the site of the riots during the '68 convention. I ask her, what was that like? You weren't much older than some of those people. And Dad, what did he say? I don't know, I watched it on TV, my mother says, still walking, not looking at me. I don't remember much about it or even thinking about it. You know, you and your brother were 6 and 4 and you took a lot of time. Dad was working nights too, so... She trails off like she does, ends her answer without answering. After all these years, I still don't know if this means she has nothing to say or she doesn't want to reveal anything more. I end up thinking what I've always thought in these moments. Don't ask her any questions. Don't upset your mother. This is why I've spent 30 years afraid to ask her about the night my father died. I think of something easy, something neutral. What about music back then? What were you listening to? The Beatles? The Stones? I liked Trini Lopez. Right. Why? I don't know, I just did. He was good. What about women's lib, I say? I mean, those women were your age. What did you think of them? You know, I always thought that was for someone else. Other women. My mother pauses. Did I ever tell you about some of the guys who lived around us? How after your father died, they would try to hit on me? They all thought that just because I was alone, I was vulnerable. So what did you do, I ask. I went on. I mean, who were they, right? Now we're crossing the bridge, the Chicago River below. Such a great point of pride in this city. How men here defeated nature's will, how they were able to reverse the river's flow, turn it in a direction it did not want to go. I still remember being taught that, 2nd grade, that and the city motto of Chicago, I will. And I always wanted to ask, I will what? I checked the Wrigley building to see the time. The hands of the clock are gone. A scaffold shrouded in black mesh surrounds its empty face. A giant mantilla. Halfway across the bridge, my mother seizes my wrist. Oh my God, she says, and she pulls me to the rail. See that? She points to a place on the bank of the Chicago River, near the base of the Tribune Tower. Manicured lawn, tidy benches, and thick clumps of impatiens, red, white. Summer days, your father and I would eat lunch down there. We'd get greasy sandwiches wrapped in wax paper from the guy we called the Greek. No gardens like now. It was just your father and me sitting on that grimy bank watching the barges come off of the lake carrying raw newsprint from Canada. They said Colonel McCormick owned whole forests up there, but the guys in the newsroom always joked that he grew newspapers, not trees. The barges would dock here, and guys would come out and they'd roll the big rolls right into the press room. My mother goes quiet. She stands there, hands holding the rail, and I can feel upon us the eyes of passers-by. Who stops on a bridge unless they're troubled, unless they're about to draw the narrative to themselves? My mother, though, she's just quiet. It feels like she's quiet forever. We cross the bridge. At the entrance of the Tribune Tower, my mother asked me to take a photograph of her. On my camera screen, she is framed by the door behind her. She says, I always tell people, this is where I was happiest. My mother smiles and I click. As she's walking out of the frame, she sees the hole in Michigan Avenue where stairs lead to the lower level. You know, the Greek was down there. He had a small shack tucked beneath the stairs. The guys in the newsroom, sometimes they'd send me out for coffee. I never took the tips they tried to give me. Why not? I asked. I was too honest. She cranes her neck, peers down the stairs. It's dark at the bottom. Come on, I say, let's go down there. Why would you want to do that? My mother says. This is so my mother. Come on, I say, let's look. Nah, there's nothing left down there. I start to descend. My mother follows. After a few steps, she stops. She tells me that the stairs are different. She says, everything's in the same place, but someone's changed the steps. We're beneath Michigan Avenue now. We're standing in front of a brick wall. Above us, a security camera grinds away, locked in a black bubble. My mother wants to find a door. It's gotta be somewhere. What's that? The old radio grill where your father and I hung out. It would have been right here. And she touches her fingertips to the dark bricks, gently, like she's testing fresh paint. That probing, tentative touch. Then she flattens her hand to the wall. I look at my mother, the bricks, the wall. But it's not, she says. A woman approaches us and asks, where do you want to go? Where do I want to go? I want to go back, lady. I want to go to the past, to when my father was alive. I want to see him walk off his shift at the Sun-Times, toss on his grungy tan raincoat, stride into the damp Chicago night, and descend these stairs to where I wait, and together my father and I go into the night, to drinks, to the truth. Where do I want to go? I want to go back to when my mother and my father were here, in love, eating sandwiches on the bank of the Chicago River. Where do I want to go? I want to go back to when my mother can remember what her life was with him, what we had as a family, what we had before that night our life ended. I want to go where we all want to go. Thank you.
We have time for some questions, if anyone has.
Yes,
I read the book and loved it.
thank you. Listen to this lady.
You experienced an enormous amount of stonewalling.
Yes.
An enormous number of people. Was it, do you think that, was it the newspaperman's code, or was it people protecting you? Or was it the Times, or what?
And just to repeat the question for her, she's saying, I experienced an enormous amount of stonewalling. It took me 10 years to write this book, about a good 8 of which involved reporting and getting people who knew my father to, well, first I had to find them and then tell the truth to me. And I don't think it was stonewalling so much as, I think this book resonates with a lot of people on a lot of levels because there's many moments in it where you, as the reader, experience your own moral compass. Imagine someone knocks on your door 40 years later and says, you knew my father, will you tell me what happened to him? This book is about the search for truth. And we all say we want the truth, but we also all know what happens to the messenger. And a lot of people in this book did that calculus. And I think, that's one of the great pleasures of the book also is it's about reporting but as I say to folks, you don't need to be writing a book to be reporting, and we all newspaper reporting and great journalism is based on what they call the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's what you need in a story, in a newspaper story, in a news story, and yet it's also what makes up a great book. And in my book, I realized that those are the great questions of literature. Who is this person? What are they struggling against? Why should we care about them? Where are they going? And I think, again, it's my journey is a very personal journey, but it's one I think that connects with a lot of people. And just in the time the book has been out, I've seen it spur a lot of conversation because people see their own family in it, their own questions and mysteries, and I've been inspired myself. I get emails every day from people who have read the book and share this sort of connection with it. So, thank you. Who else? Yes, back there.
I love the book. I thought it was fantastic.
Listen to her.
I was wondering, without giving anything away, now that it's behind you, how have you changed?
That's a great question. The question was, now that the story's behind me, how have I changed? And for those of you who haven't read it, I won't give it away, but my father died when I was 6 years old, and I had lived in fear for many years of going in search of the answer inside of this family mystery. And I think the way I would answer that question is, even though I was in my 30s when I started this search, I realized I was still, whether we've lost a father or a mother or a spouse or a sibling, we've all suffered loss. And I wanted to write about that, but in the sense that these folks may be gone from our lives, but they never leave us. And we always carry them with us. And what I think, having spent 10 years on this book and come out the other side of it, I realized I was a man in my 30s, and I was still looking at my father through the eyes of a 6-year-old boy. And I see him now, I think, man to man. And by that I see it, as my mother said, the world's a complicated place. Many people have asked me, what does my mother think about this book? And it's a great question, because she is in many ways the hero of this book. I was, without giving anything away, and I say in the book that I went searching for my father, but I found my mother. I found this strong hero at the center of it. And when I finished the book and I gave her the manuscript, I went home to Chicago and I gave it to her. I said, if you need to read this before I publish it. And my mother said, well, I'm not going to read it while you're here. I said, I don't want you to. So I went back to New York, and she called me a few days later, and I could tell she'd been crying, and I said, well, what's wrong? And she said, I just finished the book. And I said, well, why are you crying? And she said, well, it's the greatest gift you could have given me, because it's about the truth. And I said, well, why are you crying? And she said, it's brought up 40 years of memories that I haven't thought about. But I said, well, do you want me to publish it? And she said, yes, because our truth, our family story, it's the truth, and maybe this truth will inspire other families or help other people. So I think, for our family, it wasn't just myself that evolved, and my mother, my brother brought all of us closer, and a whole new level of connection. And I've seen that those waves ripple out, through the book, and I think that's something that I'll treasure my whole life, is being able to do that. Sorry. Yes, other questions?
What's the name of the book?
The book is, it's not Help for the Haunted. I don't know, that's the book. The book is After Visiting Friends. Yes. There's a website, aftervisitingfriends.com, where you can read all about it. It hit number 6 on Amazon recently. It's been on the Times bestseller list. It was short best book of the month from Amazon, as well as Apple and the Times. So it's been great yes.
Did you discuss this journey on trying to find out what happened to your father with your brother? Was he as interested as you were?
The question was, did I discuss the journey with my brother? I did. My brother, who's also appears in the book.
I haven't read yet.
That's okay. You can stay. I'll hold this up so you can all see it while I'm talking. We'll drill it into your head. My brother was 2 years old, and yes, he, it's curious. He took a different path. It took me many years to sort of take my journey. My brother's married with 3 kids, and he was always there for me as I was going on this journey, and I would check in with him and tell him what I've learned, and he would sort of give me thoughts and guidance. But I think that I was the one who was taking this path, but he was sort of guiding me. And I think that's another thing I think is powerful in this book is there's some characters you'll meet in here that when we all think about taking these journeys in our life, and they can be big, such as mine, or they can be smaller, but we all think, oh, I can't go. No, that's 40 years ago. No one's going to know the answer to this. And had I stuck to that, I would still be without an answer. But here I was 40 years later, and I met people who, it's not giving anything away, but there's two women in this book. One works in the morgue in Chicago. The other works in the hospital records department where my father was taken when he died. And I say this to all of you, whether you read the book or not, don't ever think that people out there are not waiting to help you. The people that you will never imagine are out there who are waiting to help you if you just ask. These hands that will sort of appear on your back when you're at a fork in the road to guide you down the right path. It's an amazing thing, and I would say to all of you, if you're waiting to take your journey, you don't need to be writing a book to do that. You should just don't waste time. Don't wait until it's too late to have those conversations with the people in your life who you love. In working on this book, I had to have conversations with my mother that I never would have had. I found out the song that she and my father fell in love to. I found out where they went on their first dates, and I never knew that. And it's curious, but my mother, as you can see in this book, she's a very quiet woman, and I grew up in this house of silences. It was in Chicago, but it's a very Yankee sort of quality, I think. And when I first started asking her, like, well, where did you go on these dates with Dad? Oh, you don't care. No, come on. No, who cares? See, come on. So she said, well, if you really care, and so she went upstairs, and she comes back down, and she had her calendar from 1958, and she's had every calendar since then, and it was May 7th, 1958. Went to the bit and bridal with Bob. May 10th, Bob called. May 11th, it was just this amazing original record of their life, and I thought, I'm so happy I found this before it was too late, and that I wasn't just cleaning out drawers and found these things. And I think when you think about our own identities, we all like to think, in this day and age, well, we are these self-created beings, but we forget how our identities, which are our own narratives, are intertwined with our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents. We're not just their physical sequels, we're their narrative sequels. And we forget that sometimes, and we forget where our stories sort of overlap, because we haven't even asked to hear where those stories overlap. And I think, again, one of the powers of this book I've seen and heard is just, it prompts those conversations and inspires those connections. So. Yes?
Have you heard from other people since the book was published who also knew your dad, and maybe news stories?
I did. The question was if I heard from people who knew my mother and father. I've heard from people who, how come you didn't call me? I wanted to be in the book. I said, I didn't know you were out there. It wouldn't take me 10 years if I had known you. But no, other people have come forward who knew my father, my mother, who knew other people in the book, and so that's been a great pleasure. And I say really what's been powerful for me and an honor for me is hearing people sharing their stories of mystery, and these heartbreaking stories. This woman just emailed me today. I was reading on the way up here, and she said, my father died when I was 5. My mother told me he died in a car accident. And she said, we live next door to a service station, and said every day for 2 weeks I waited for his car to be towed over there, and it never showed up. And I always thought, well, what happened to his car? And I wanted to ask my mother, and she said it was only years later when I found out that he had killed himself, and wasn't a car crash, but and it was these ripples of, again, stories that we tell each other, and we think we're protecting someone. Well, it was a story, but the truth inside these stories is what we all search for, and I wanted to sort of get to that. As my grandmother said, there's stories inside of lots of stories you haven't heard. And when I worked on the book, it was about how these memories we experience, they propel us forward. And one thing I came away from the book realizing is sometimes in our lives we forget that in order to go forward we need to go into the past. We need to go into our past, our family's past, and maybe reconcile something or just learn something before we can really go forward again. So that was a powerful lesson I learned as well.